really selfish in my mind at that time, because I wanted to make films, and like the few of us who were trying to do that here, we didn't have much of a clue of how to do it, and we thought, well, if we're going to spend that money, we should get people up here who can explain it to us, and a film festival seemed to be the best way to do that. So I said, well, maybe I better go to see these fancy film festivals around the world and see what I can pick up. So I went on a tour of them all, Berlin, Venice, Cannes, and I came back and thought, this is really terrible. These don't do anything that I would like, so I'm sure we can do a much better one here. So that's why we started it.
And what were some of your the partners that you partnered with? How did you guys decide to get together? Were you friends? Was this a passion for all of you?
Again, it was a really strange thing. I was working at City Hall at the time. I was chief of staff to David Crombie when he was the mayor, and I was getting bored with that because I was also partnered with Hank Vanderkook in Film Consortium of Canada, and I wanted to get back to it. So I was having lunch with Dusty Cole, who was a pal that did a lot of work for developers in town. I don't know what he did, but he was definitely in the business. And we had lunch, and he said, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'd really like to start a film festival. And he said, really? He said, I've been going to the Cannes Film Festival by accident for several years, and I love it. So if you're going to do that, I'm going to be your accomplice. I said, what a great idea. Why don't we work on it? And that's how difficult it was, and that's exactly what we did.
So it came out of like a lot of interesting things. It came out of just a simple desire for you to find out more and to learn more.
Yeah, it was, but then I realized that wasn't how you could sell a film festival. I realized you had to spend a lot of money to make one work, and people weren't going to give it to teach Bill how to make movies. So I had to say, there's a reason for it. And it seemed really obvious to me the reason in Toronto was, it's the greatest multicultural city in the world. Everybody comes from someplace else. So when I went around to Italy and Greece and France, everybody had these dozens and dozens of films that they couldn't sell to the English-speaking market, because God help us, Americans wouldn't watch anything with subtitles on it, so nobody would buy them, and there was no ethnic television. So if I bring these movies, get the best ones I can, and they gave me a dozen of them, I bet I have an audience, and we did. And we'd run them at 10 o'clock in the morning in the rain, and people would come, and they came 37,000 of them in the first year.
What were the venues that you used on your first couple of years?
Oh, it was any place that had a coffee bar and had a screen and some seats. We were in, what were my favorite ones? I couldn't get any of the big theaters, although Famous Players tried to help us, and Cineplex hadn't been invented yet, so that came later. But Famous Players gave us some very good theaters. We had the Uptown and that group of theaters there. And then we had what we call it, the theater that's a McDonald's and everything else now. That was in the basement at the corner of Charles. So they were here, there, and everywhere. They weren't what you would call the smooth operations that we have now in Toronto, where we've got, what is it, 35 different venues. What we were working on, a few of us who were involved, we got the government to change the rules so that people could invest in movies the way they did in oil and gas. And that was a very, very prominent time for us to do it. And we were making a fair number of films. I don't know that there were any terrifically great ones, but some of them did come along that we learned on, and I think the sort of Canadian artistes, if you like to call it then, liked the fact that they had an opportunity to make films that their American competitors couldn't do because they had the tax breaks. Now, there weren't that many of the great artists, and a lot of people now talk about, oh, I didn't like those terrible tax shelter days. But you'll find all the guys that are still making movies, that's how they got started making them.
Now, with the Canadian Film Centre started around the same time as the festival, there was always a synergy between the two. Is that correct?
Well, I think that's because Norman Jewison had gone on to the board of the film festival, and Norman, no matter how big he gets in America, has always been a Canada firster. So he thought we were doing useful things, and he began to see the issues, which were that there are all sorts of film schools, but generally speaking, film schools are a place that you look at films and study them. I don't know that it teaches you much about them. But Norman had this vision of setting up some place that people could learn about the business and from people who were in the business. And I think it was a brilliant idea, and it's grown and proven itself since then. Much film being made, it's easier now, and anybody can do it. And they are doing it. I know Sundance was saying they had 16,000 submissions this year in features. Well, give me a break. There aren't 16,000 great features being made. And the more they go running around, the more they clutter up people's life, and people don't like independent film. The ones I've seen, quite yawners. So I think people ought to make fewer films. If you don't tell a story, what's the problem? What's the point? Yeah, I think that's one of the benefits we've had, because right from the beginning, we haven't had this kind of board that says we have to have this and we have to have that. We leave it up to the artistic director, and he decides what's going to be a good film, and we don't care what anybody else says. One of the good things about our board, we get into all sorts of controversy, not intentionally, but you know, Midnight Express was one where the Turkish government was really furious about us having the film and wanted it canceled. We said no, and this comes up all the time. And there's people with religious problems that don't want us to do it, people that say there's too much sex and something. Remember, in praise of older women back in the early days. Well, I don't know that they did anything. I think they made Robert Lantos richer because there was so much publicity about it.
Yeah, the promotion seems to be big on that end, particularly. Now, another thing in regards to this, the submission process, because there has been a lot of changes right now, but just to let all the filmmakers know out there that when you do submit your film, it gets seen by at least how many people would you think if it's liked?
Well, I think if it's disliked, there's a tendency to find out. If you watch a film for 10 minutes and you haven't seen anything that's worthwhile, you kind of think the guy's clueless, because why would you have 10 boring minutes? Chances of it getting better are zero. So if you're going to have any exciting parts in your film, it better be near the beginning. Little tip.
Yeah. And
but if a film has merit, you know, we have the best team of programmers on the planet around the world. I think there's 27 now. So anything that comes out, and I guess we've built a reputation now that if you've got a film that you want certainly the Western world to see, this is the best place to bring it. So we get shown just about everything and we don't miss much. So if somebody comes out with something and says, I didn't get a shot, I don't think that's the case. You get a good shot here. Yeah, I must say in the early days when I was doing the film picking, my criteria were very low in the early years. They had to have sprockets and they had to be on celluloid. But you know, you get pickier and pickier, and I think that's one of the advantages of being successful. You get all the best stuff to pick from. Well, I guess that was kind of a, you know, I'm very proud of the Toronto Film Festival, but I don't think anybody can do more to it now. We're packed to this gunnels. We can't take any more films. We can't have any more audiences. It's like the Queen Mary. And I thought, well, I'd like to do something a little different. So I was looking around, and I said, I can't do another diversity festival. What's special? And it struck me that Niagara had this unique combination of it's a #1 tourist attraction because of the waterfall that's down there. But then you've got these amazing wineries and this amazing culinary reputation. And you've got cultural things like the Shaw Festival. And you've got the whole St. Catharines, what would you call it, burgeoning talent. And at first I thought, well, I'll try and develop that. So I put a program together that basically said, okay, you would come here normally to get great wine and great food, and what if you were watching all that in the vineyard? What if you got a good movie at the same time? That should be an interesting combination, and I hope I'm right.
And this time, did you go check out any festivals that did similar things, or did you just go forward?
No, I just went forward because it's there. Now, since then, I found out that Napa Valley, a few years ago, has developed something very similar, and it's very successful. They've got two advantages. One, Napa Valley is very rich, and they make great wine, and it's pretty close to Hollywood, so they've got an easier stretch. I've got to convince people to come to Niagara, not just for the good food and the good wine, but because your film will get known. But that'll take a couple of years.